Hey friends, Drakos here to talk to you a little bit about the EU LCS Regional Qualifier, specifically Unicorns of Love and Fnatic, what they showed us in the playoffs and what I'd like to see from them coming into the Gauntlet. I did Splice and HK yesterday, so if you want to look at that, you can check the link below. It was a Facebook post, though, so it will not be a video, potentially a little bit less accessible. However, for now, on to the Unicorns of Love. All right, Unicorns of Love. Unicorns! They got destroyed. Totally destroyed in playoffs, and I mean destroyed. This was an incredibly one-sided series against Misfits, and honestly, it felt like everything that could go wrong did go wrong. Just a veritable proof of Murphy's Law, but how did it go so wrong? I feel like the easiest place to start is the draft. If you look back at Game 2 specifically, Unicorns of Love opted for Kassadin into Lucian, and choosing to get hard countered is just clearly the wrong choice in my opinion. Normally, I know you can expect Kassadin to lose lane a little bit. You can expect him to sit back and farm up and be safe and be more relevant past level 6. And the adage that's always repeated is that if he hits level 16, you just win the game because of how oppressive he can be. But this lane is so incredibly Lucian favored that I don't really think that there's any way to justify the pick. And this was really just the most obvious issue within the draft. I also think that there were a couple other falters coming in from Unicorns of Love that felt wrong for me, and I think from a lot of the other analysts in the EU LCS. Doesn't really set the team up for success, but the other major issue really was individual performances. UOL never got the chance to play as a team due to someone kind of always falling down so far in the laning phase that grouping wasn't a great option. And the most interesting thing was it felt like it was a different person just about every game. Now, if we start at game 1, I think Hylissang was the clear underperformer. And in this year, when you look at Hylissang, I've kind of started to consider him a bit of a coin flip player. His aggressive playstyle in lane, sometimes it looks fucking awesome, right? He looks fantastic. He blows people up. He wins lanes single-handedly, sometimes as early as level 2. But the opposite is true as well. And when you look at why this happens, one of the biggest factors that I see is that Hylissang has this really interesting habit of extending losing trades, hoping to turn them into winning trades. And the biggest example of this from the series versus Misfits is game 1. Hylissang is playing Trundle into Blitzcrank. The lanes are Trundle Xayah versus Tristana Blitzcrank, and he's going to get hooked in, right? And so now Ignar has no rocket grab, and in Hylissang's mind, this is my theory, if he extends the trade, if he looks to get multiple chomps in, multiple Trundle Qs before the hook comes back up from Blitzcrank, he will have eventually won the trade. And he does it. He commits. He goes full in. Now, the issue is that Samix isn't really in a great position to punish this, so he already starts on the back foot. He's already been hooked in, which is not a great start either. And what ultimately ends up happening is that he extends a losing trade and then loses it even worse. He gives up 2 health pots in lane basically before even level 2 comes through for anybody. So already a massive deficit. And the issue is that even after this failure, he continues to try to go for more forward, more aggressive plays. I can respect the confidence, but ultimately it's the reason that he goes down to the Tristana early on, gives up that first kill, and it just gets worse from there. And no longer is it just Hylissang is giving up these advantages. Samix is now so far behind as well comparatively that he cannot compete with his opposition, with Hans Sama, and he dies as well. And eventually Hans Sama goes on to pretty much single-handedly carry the game across multiple fights. It was fantastic play from Hans Sama, but really Hylissang in the laning phase gave him every advantage he could possibly want on a silver platter. Shout out to Ignar as well for hitting so many good hooks, but I feel like if Hylissang had played back, played more safe, then it wouldn't have been an exploitable option for Misfits against the Unicorns of Love, and it concerns me that this could be a problem for him. But, however, there is a positive for game 1. I do want to highlight that Exile played pretty well on the Talon. He is a guy that's received a lot of criticism, but in the Talon versus Cassio matchup against Power of Evil, he did look decent. He didn't really give up any massive advantages early on, but unfortunately for him, his bot lane collapsed, and once that happens, there's just not a lot that you can do when someone falls so far into a deficit. Game 2, of course, the Kassadin game, I already mentioned it, Kassadin to Lucian, super one-sided matchup. Max Lore and Power of Evil did a wonderful job of punishing him, but definitely I feel like Exile could have played it better, and I also would have liked to see more from Visit Chachi in this game. However, once again, when you look at it, when you look at a draft that's not set up for success, when you look at a single lane collapsing this hard, it's hard to be super critical of individual members because there's not really a lot you can do when a mid laner can walk into your lane and solo kill you at any point. There's not a lot you can do when there's zero pressure and your jungler is trapped in the jungle. You're just not in a position to succeed. In Game 3, this is another Exile Talon game. The thing that disappoints me is that he played so well in Game 1, but in Game 3, I think if you have to look at a single reason for Unicorns of Love to lose the game, I think it was back and forth for a while, but ultimately, Exile gets caught a ton in side lanes, like so many times, and it gives up so many advantages for Unicorns of Love that ultimately, once Misfits are able to get a Baron, they pretty much just roll through Unicorns effortlessly. And Talon's not really a pick where you can afford to give stuff up like that, because it's not like you have a great comeback mechanic. And while Unicorns of Love are fantastic at team fighting, and I think one of the few teams in the world that are good at utilizing talent in a team fight, it's not enough, right? And you still can't afford to make blatant mistakes. And yes, lesser teams may fall for it, but Misfits were not going to get punished for it. And everything here I'm talking about, right, is pretty negative when it comes to looking at Unicorns of Love. So I want to talk a little bit about the potential changes they can make, some of the positives, because ultimately I think it's wrong to count Unicorns of Love out of this gauntlet, even if they did have a pretty abysmal quarterfinals performance. So personally, I'd really like to see Exile expand his champion pool. I think it's pretty clear what you can expect from him in pick ban phases. I think teams are playing around this. Picks like the LeBlanc, the Vladimir, the Talon, pretty much his standard go-tos. Outside of that, he looks significantly worse. If you can pick up a couple standard champions, I'd say Syndra Orianna. I think there are multiple options though, but Syndra and Orianna feel like they would round out his champion pool, give Unicorns of Love a much less... It's weird to call Unicorns of Love draft predictable, but I think it is safe to say that Exile's picks are predictable. So I think it would make, in this sense, their draft less predictable and potentially have more safe draft options as well. For Hylissang, I think it's easy to look at his play, to be critical and just say, hey, chill out, dude. Stop playing so aggressive. But I actually really like that he plays aggressive. I just think that the issue is when he goes in for this aggressive play, right? When he loses that extended trade at level 1 in the instance of the game 1 game, or the game 1 against Misfits, I think you just need to stop after that, right? You can't double down when you've already lost, when you're already in a deficit. If you do, you are just going to give up the game. And there's much better, much more ideal scenarios to take large risks. And it's definitely not in a 2v2 laning phase this early into the game. So Hylissang, keep doing you, but when it fails, maybe play back a bit, maybe play a little bit safer, because you just cannot afford to generate so many opportunities for your opponents to get huge leads in the laning phase. For the rest of the lineup, I just want to see consistent performances. Samix was a monster. I really want to praise him for his regular season. I think he's going to do great in the Gauntlet if Hilly can stay even. I think he is the strongest performing member of Unicorns of Love in terms of consistency. And Vizzy and Xerxes, yeah, they were underwhelming that series, but they have had pretty good regular seasons. And I think that they can step up in this series. And I think that Vizichachi ultimately was our spring MVP for a damn good reason. He was doing work on the Unicorns of Love roster, even on champions you wouldn't necessarily consider playmaking champions. So I just want to see that return to form for the Unicorns of Love. But all of that said, I think the important thing to remember about the Unicorns of Love is that they have a very different perspective on competitive League of Legends than just about any team I have ever spoken to. And the issues I've identified might not be anywhere on their radar, right? They could have a totally different impression of what they need to solve. And this isn't something that I'm used to experiencing. And so I think it's safe to say that they will have changed something. What it's going to be, I actually have no idea. And the ultimate thing is to give them the respect they deserve, because the Unicorns have had now 3 weeks to prepare, and they're going to have something special, and that's kind of a terrifying prospect. From the third place series, I think Fnatic have improved since their series against Misfits. I think they identified some of the weaknesses that they had, improved on them a little bit, and I think generally gave their opponents a little bit more respect. It's hard to say that entirely that they disrespected Misfits, but at the same time, Jesus was very confident in like coming on the analyst desk and being like, we're going to trash them. Easy match, no problem. And then obviously the exact opposite happened. So not potentially giving their opponent not enough credit there, and definitely giving enough credit to H2K. However, still some issues remain, even after that third place series, even after they were able to win. The biggest issue for me is Broxah in regular season versus playoffs. Now, Broxah is the #1 All-Pro jungler for the summer regular season for good reason, but in the playoffs, he did look scared. I don't know what caused the change. Maybe it's that Fnatic's laners weren't as dominant, that they weren't finding as big advantages as they usually do. That might make Broxah's job harder. Maybe it was nerves or stage pressure. Last season, they were kind of the underdogs, right? Not a lot of pressure on them. Anything they did was above expected. This season, they're kind of the expected champions. That's a huge shift. I'm not 100% sure, but I will say that regardless of the cause, this is what I saw. Fnatic were, over the course of the playoffs, they're prioritizing Broxah on Gragas, 6 out of Fnatic's 9 games. were on the champion did have Gragas in the jungle, and when it comes to drafting in the 7-16 metagame, I think Gragas is a fantastic choice. He's insanely versatile. Whenever he's strong, he's always going to get played because he has so much utility. Engage, disengage, fantastic clear for the most part, pretty safe clear as well. But in the hands of Broxah, I feel like those limits weren't really pushed. I feel like the Gragas was really underwhelming, and he just seemed so hesitant to make the body slam flash plays. He seemed hesitant to look for those engages when he was the sole source. He did invade a bit, and you have to credit him for that, but it didn't feel consistent. It didn't feel like he was getting these bigger advantages, and he always just went back to a very, very defensive play style. Some of these games, he was Fnatic's best and often only option to engage, but he wasn't pulling the trigger, and I felt like that cost him a ton. When he wasn't the only option, he did look much better. When Jesus was on an engaged champion, we saw that as well. But as kind of Reckless said in the MVP interview, he said that the only thing that Broxah really needs to do is to push himself further, to get out of his comfort zone, and I think it's definitely something Fnatic need as well, because they can't really afford to rely solely on Broxah to make plays or to start fights solo from what we've seen in playoffs. The other issue I saw for Fnatic was Soaz. It's pretty easy to look back at a few moments across Fnatic's 2 series and see that Soaz was just not giving the enemy jungler enough respect and just generally getting caught out a lot. It's really a shame too, because when you watch back the actual laning phases, I think he played really well in trades, 1v1 all-ins. Camille and Anar comes to mind from the Misfits series. I think he did really well initially, but then I don't know if he's too eager to generate leads for the team or if he's being fed wrong information about where the jungler is, but he'll go in and just get ganked, and he goes from this even laning phase where I feel like he's winning a lot of scenarios where he shouldn't to very clearly costing the team some advantages. Some of those games, it's understandable, right? Game 4 against H2K, Ottawamne on Renekton, pretty disgustingly large advantage for Odo very early in the game. There's not a lot you can do as a J4 in that scenario. I think maybe some could have given up a few less opportunities, but at the end of the day, that's super nitpicky in the scale of things. On the side of Fnatic, there is a shining light. It is the cliche. It is the one that we always look at. I think Perk said it best when he said Reckless was smurfing in the H2K series, played fantastically. The team also set him up for success, but he just continues to show fantastic performances. I know, super original opinion on Fnatic. Reckless is good. Yay. Well, it's not original, but of course it's true, and I think it's something that Fnatic have to capitalize on moving forward. They are going to be reliant on Reckless to kind of bring it home for the team. And I think the lion's share of the praise may ultimately belong to him if Fnatic are able to qualify as Europe's 3rd seed for Worlds. But for the rest of Fnatic, I just really want to see Broxah leave that small comfort zone, make those big aggressive plays, just like he did when he first joined the team. If you think back to those Lee Sin performances, often against Cassia, where he'd like perfectly leap in and dodge the petrifying gaze and then kick a guy back into the team. It was fantastic. It was great mechanical display. And in the top lane, I want to see Soaz calm down a little bit. Maybe get into Broxah's now vacant comfort zone and just give a bit more respect to the enemy jungler. Overall, I think that's about it for Fnatic. I think they are a strong team coming in. Hey guys, thanks so much for watching my first video on this channel. Be sure to like and subscribe if you enjoyed it. At this point, we are a very little baby channel, and I would love to get to angsty teen channel status before the start of Worlds. Of course, if you have anything to say about my commentary on Unicorns Love or Fnatic, let me know in the comments below. Maybe we can have a little bit of a discussion, or if you have any suggestions for any kind of future content, things you'd like to see me do, things you'd like to see me talk about, let me know there as well. Until then, thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.